Hello, Ashraf.
Hello, Celine. Thank you for inviting me to have this chat with you.
It's a pleasure to have this conversation called Between Us. So everything you're going to say this morning is going to stay between us, Ashraf, no worries.
Hardly.
Hardly. But just to remind our audience, we're going to go through some beautiful artworks that you've selected from the wealth of pieces that are available during the Investec Cape Town Art Fair first digital event. And before we do that, I have a question for you, Ashraf.
Yes.
The first and last time we met in person, 1.5 years ago at the Cape Town Art Fair,
exactly.
In Cape Town,
yeah.
We would have never imagined what was going to happen. And that the next time we would meet would be through digital.
Yes.
And digital technologies have taken, most of our lives in the past 1.5 years. And I wanted to ask you, how did this impact your vision of art and your experience of art as we are speaking today through a computer together?
Right. Well, firstly, Celine, like you, who would have guessed that in February 2020, just around the corner, suddenly there'd be a global shutdown? There we were at the Cape Town Art Fair having a wonderful time in this great hubbub, people moving around, artworks available, what we knew to be the art experience. The art fair was, of course, a defining aspect of it. Was and remains to me incredibly thrilling, and I cannot wait for the resumption of art fairs at some point. I'm not resigning myself to the digital front at all. I still very strongly believe in the interface with the materiality of artworks, to actually know their strength and to be able to tell their stories effectively. But at the same time, I must accept that digitization has at least helped us to continue. And I've been amazed by how immensely successful auction houses have been, for example, in an age of digitization and global lockdown. And how certainly blue chip art has been thriving. But at the same time, I'm also excited by the development in emergent artworks and artists, which have also grown, especially on the, let's call it on the woman's front or the Black front, because of course, in terms of a major shift that's occurred over the last 1.5 years, has been an important sort of emphasis on Black artists and women artists, and trying to rethink the white male monopoly, for lack of a better phrase. So in terms of, that's certainly one of the things that have been intriguing whenever I open my phone and I look at Artsy or at any other number of art sites. These are the driving concerns. I'm trying to rethink, for example, the importance of Black portraiture as a sign of Black self-reclamation, and asking myself, to what extent is this a significant move, a historical move, a fad? Is it sustainable? Is this truly a representation of Black life, or merely another commodification or fetishization of the Black body? There are many questions in many ways and angles one can look at it. I'm not by nature a cynic, Celine, at all. I always try to be as optimistic as possible in my reading of the art world.
Thank you. And I can feel really the professor in you today, Ashraf, and that's really great. And you, I think, really made a point of this transformation, social transformation we are living at the moment. And I think that the major, I would say, a thought that comes to mind is that it's a transformation that comes from the people, and people are claiming more than ever today this new representation of the world, of our history, and that's I think a very fascinating time to live as well. And you just mentioned portraiture, and I think there's no better way to move to the first artist you've selected for this conversation today, and that's Juan Stockenstrom.
Yes.
And we would love to hear why you selected Juan's work, and if you can enlighten us a little bit about it.
Well, firstly, Celine, I'd like to frame the fact that the 3 artists I've selected Johan Stockenstrom, Superisa Sibusi, and Osvaldo Ferreira. What links them all is a fascination with the fantastical. And I found that really intriguing because in a world of gritty realism, of historical accountability, of the Me Too movement, of the Black Lives Matter movement, which deal very much with gravitas and realpolitik and the need to transform things on the ground. It's encouraging to see artists actually choosing to work with fantasy, or to work with illusion, or with a new kind of projection. And this is what's striking about these works by Johan Stockenstrom, which you invited me to look at, because in many ways they are symbolic and they're archetypal, and they read as sort of mystical sort of worlds, which is very unusual, as I say, given the focus on gritty realism in terms of the accountability of the Black body. So I found this shift very, 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 very inspiring, because yes, we do get a clear sense of Black iconography, but it's highly stylized, almost cubistic in certain ways. It's structural computation. It's even digital, even though it's painting, it feels it could be, or collage could be also something digitized. What it is fundamentally is the projection of the imagination, not only the literalism of Black life. And I find that to be very, very reassuring and inspiring.
Perfect. Thank you for linking the three artists together. In fact, Ashraf, that's a very good way of looking at this very different work in some ways, but that relates to each other.
Exactly, because you see, again, here with Superisa Sibusi's work, you might look at it and say, well, this is another example of documentary realism. But no, it's a highly stylized sort of imagery. He's working very much in this photograph and in the other work. There is a strong sense of a strong grasp of space, spatial sort of orchestration that has got a very strong design sensibility. It's got a strong poetics. But at the same time, in the middle of it, there are these strange, quirky elements. In this case, there's the teddy bear. And in another work, a very strange sort of creature that looks like it steps straight out of a manga. Or, you know what I mean? It's his working with masks and working with, and what's interesting about it, he creates a surreal dimension to the everyday world. And that's where the fantastical dimension actually happens. People don't just live in the everyday. People live in the realm of dreams, fantasies, hopes, anxieties. All of these things are played out in our lives, and they're part of our deep unconscious worlds. And what I love, again, is that Superisa is reminding us that Black life is not merely about literalism. Black life has a complexity, has a depth, has got a deep structure and unconscious. It is not necessarily immediately penetrable. It is not necessarily immediately about pain, which very often people read Black life as, iconic and symbolic of pain. He's saying, no, there are other things happening. And if you notice in both these photographs, they're very similarly styled. There's this gap, this point of this open space beyond, an enclosure. So again, instead of thinking of township life as an entrapment, he's seeing township life as a space that has many openings. And it's again that kind of healthy dimension. So if, for example, Johan Stockenstrom is looking at the fantastical and the symbolic, other dimensions of Black life and Black experience, here again, we're finding that sort of, that draw, that interest being played out.
Thank you. Very insightful. And now we move to a apparently different approach.
Yeah.
And, with Osvaldo Ferreira.
Yes, I mean, this Angolan artist, again, what I found really exciting here, firstly, and I noticed this, in fact, when I was discussing the Joburg Art Fair last year, the Digital Art Fair. What struck me about African art was the vivacity of the color palette. This is the thing that really, really hit me. There were so many works that were vibrant, and aspiring and positive in terms of its iconography and in terms of its color palette. And this work by Osvaldo Ferreira, again, pushes that envelope, the idea and the importance of color. Yes, it's got a very strong pop dimension. It's got a very strong sort of interest in the history of textiles, which we think of mistakenly as coming from West Africa, but in fact, they come via Holland and they come via Asia, and they actually entered Africa via the eastern seaboard, and then were moved up through Africa, and then became an iconic definition of West African style. But so it makes you realize that everything culturally is hybrid. So for example, trying to essentialize Black experience, trying to essentialize African experience, trying to codify what constitutes African art, African contemporary art, is way too simplistic. It's a hybrid like any other art in any other part of the world. And this is a typical example of that. But what I love about this work, again, is the playfulness, it's the warmth, the engagement, it's the familiarity. This is not the Black body as object to be seen, but these are figures, women primarily, who are engaging our eyes and inviting us into a world of play.
Yeah.
Now, that's the other thing that very often we forget when we think about Black experience, that it is about play as well as it is about oppression and pain. And I think what is happening in terms of this revolution in the 21st century of how we see Black life is our desire and the artist's desire to share this dimension of Black experience. And it is very evident here, not simply because of the brightness of the colors or the vivacity of the engagement of the figures, but the combination tells us this is an African world, but an African world that is accessible to the entire world. As Steve Bantu Biko once said, it is Africa that will give the world a human face. And I think what Osvaldo Ferreira is trying to remind us is that in the midst of so much gravity and grief and despair, which we are experiencing worldwide, somehow at this historical moment, our focus is on African art. It's not only because it is the next frontier or a new commodity, but because Africa psychologically, emotionally, humanly, has a gift that it must give to the world, and is embodied in this work by Osvaldo Ferreira.
Absolutely. These are very inspiring words, of course, Ashraf. Thank you for this. And I can't help myself noticing also this, kind of corridor that maybe leads us to also a way, just like an opening, as you mentioned, for the previous work, right? At the end, at the background of the painting.
Exactly. Again, it's true. Sort of again, one senses there's a long game, a long vision. It's not simply about what's immediately in front of us. It has a sense of perspective and depth, and also even a quality of infinity that is being played out in this image as well. Again, that gives us and asks us to remind us, what is it that Africa has to offer us? It's not what we have pejoratively been constructing for the last 500 years, as a zone of exploitation or a site of underdevelopment or anything very much with the whole litany of negative associations. We have realized that we cannot actually suppress the positivity of Africa, and I think it's here, it's there in Sibusiso Berka's work, which has this aperture and openness to what we see as the constriction of township life, a sense of wonder and fantasy that's been played out in that world, as it is played out in Johan Stockenstrom's paintings as well. So this is what seems to be, for me, the key connective tissue. Not that the works are like each other, they're very different, but what they share is a genuine and deep interest in the importance of fantasy, of art as a dreaming tool, which makes one think, of course, also of the famous well-known phrase, Afrofuturism, the idea, which combines Africa and the future into one combine that gives us a sense of a utopian world that still awaits us, in which Africa has a central role to play.
Where artists definitely contributes to also lead the way, I would say. Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to conclude here then, Ashraf. This last work will be the conclusion word. I wanted to thank you and invite the people that are viewing this video to, of course, browse and discover other artworks that will tell different stories.
Exactly. And this work by Osvaldo Ferreira, what's interesting is the tension between play and contemplation. The two aspects which again have been denied the Black body. The Black body is not seen to have an interiority or a contemplative capacity. It's basically been voided over 500 years, denied its soul, its imagination, its agency, its being. And what Osvaldo Ferreira is reminding us in the figure in the foreground is that there's an inner musing, an inner world, an inner life. It's not simply about surfaces or objects or bodies or objectification. It's about the inner world, a deep interiority. So that is juxtaposed with the realm of play and of joy. And the tension again asks us to remember the complexity of human experience, not Black experience, of human experience, not female experience. The idea of what makes us human, what connects us irrespective of our genders or the fluidity of our genders or the allocation we give and define ourselves according to our races, our colors, our ages. We share one thing in common, is that we are human. And this again is very evident because in this work, you cannot objectify the figures you see because something in the artist is resisting it. The painter is basically telling us, refusing that reading, which we tend to apply prejudicially or unconsciously, and says, no, look at the openness, look at the play, look at the light, look at the wonder, look at the dreamscape that I've created for you, and inviting you to join us in the midst of.
Yeah. A lot of inspiring ideas to think about. Thank you so much, Ashraf,
it's again, a pleasure.
For your time. And we'll be in touch soon, hopefully in Cape Town in February next year.
Absolutely.